Improving the judiciary is just one of the items on the agenda for the new legal year.
A new bill focusing on technology introduced in Parliament today.
And works officials continued mandatory load testing of the Paradise Island Bridge. The Bahamas Tonight starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Every Day.
The role of the court in fighting crime highlighted during the opening of the new legal year today. Good evening, everyone. I'm Keishla Adderley.
And I'm Andrew Knowles. It's good to have you joining us. Fern Carey tells us tonight the Chief Justice also spoke out in defense of members of the legal community on an issue of rising public concern.
Despite rising criticism from the public regarding judges granting bail to persons accused of serious crimes, Chief Justice Sir Michael Barnett strongly defended members of the legal fraternity during his address at the opening of the legal year.
I am aware of the criticism that judges have received on their decisions to grant or refuse bail. We are aware that the suggestion has been made at the highest levels to further curtail the discretion of justices to grant bail. This is healthy criticism. We are not immune from criticism. But I believe it is important to remind persons of the principles relating to bail and to the fact that justices do not capriciously or arbitrarily grant bail without regard to these principles.
The Chief Justice noted that judges also live in this community and are aware and concerned about crime. He then explained that judges follow certain principles when considering bail applications, which he said number 50 per week.
That the suspect remaining at large is the rule. His detention on the ground of suspicion is the exception. And even then, if he is not put on his trial within a reasonable time, he has to be released. Quote, the principles are: an arrested or detained person has a right to be released on bail as a result of the right of liberty and the presumption of innocence. This right must be balanced against the interests of the state, that the person does not frustrate the course of justice by flight, interfering with witnesses, or committing other crimes.
He indicated that judges also impose conditions when bail is granted, and if they are not followed, the bail is revoked. Meantime, the Chief Justice noted that the additional courts expected to come on stream next month are timely. However, he had this caution.
I urge members of the executive that in their language, they do not appear to be dictating to the courts how they ought to be run. Whilst I am satisfied that this is not their intent, it is imperative that they do not undermine public confidence in the judiciary by language and statements that leave this impression.
In the end, the Chief Justice said the challenges in the administration of justice will require the commitment and the participation of all parties involved. Fern Carey, ZNS Network News.
Come March 3rd, 10 criminal courts are expected to be operational. This according to Attorney General Alison Maynard Gibson, noting that the justice system is, quote, fundamentally broken, end quote. The Attorney General said that 10 courts are part of a new strategy to be implemented this year.
10 courts by themselves will not make a difference. 10 courts together with new strategies will make a difference. They will enable serious matters to routinely be brought on for trial within a year of the person being charged, which will dramatically reduce the numbers charged with serious offenses being released on bail. On the present track, 10 courts together with enhanced and new strategies will come on stream on the 3rd of March 2014, when the temporary courts are expected to commence operation.
Other strategies include a significant campaign for witness protection and ongoing training for prosecutors and magistrates.
Well, in the wake of a number of oil spills that have occurred in Bahamian waters, the Ministry of Transport and Aviation plans to improve the lightering process, that is, transferring of fuel from one ship to the next. For the first time, steps are being made to regularize this lightering process in industry and, by a wider scope, modernize the industry through a national maritime plan now being formulated by the government.
Well, Janaea Noel Ferguson reports tonight that safety was the focus of today's meeting at the Port Department, at which time industry stakeholders view the new regulations as a step in the right direction.
It's a process that's gone unregulated for decades. That is the transfer of fuel to and from vessels in Bahamian waters. But a bold initiative is being taken by the Ministry of Transport to change all of that and put the country's maritime industry on par with the rest of the world. Port Controller Commander Patrick McNeil explains the importance.
And there was no regulation in place or instrument in place to safeguard our marine environment and to safeguard the government in the event that there's spillage or some accident that may occur as a result of the exercise being executed. So the Ministry of Transport and Aviation saw a need and very quickly decided to put in place this regulatory instrument that would allow us to operate safely and to also protect those who are part and parcel of this exercise.
The lightering industry is heavily regulated on an international front, and McNeil says safety is paramount. Consultant in the Ministry of Transport Brent Williamson urges Bahamians to take advantage of the new opportunities set to unfold.
We're going to look at things from encouraging persons to get into the industry, inclusive of females. We want to drive to get more awareness into the industry. It's very diversified. It's littered with opportunities, and I think we have a duty and an obligation to share and develop these opportunities within the country.
Meanwhile, industry stakeholders say they are also preparing for the changes set to take place, which can mean more money being pumped into the local economy.
It's the clients just waiting on these regulations to be set in place so that they can send ships here to do business. Once, in fact, the regulations are affordable and they're user-friendly, we have a ton of clients that are here waiting just to do business.
Okay.
An additional increase probably from my agency alone, probably about 100 ships a year. And that's just our agency. So it's again, if I have that much ships, I have to employ at least 5 or 6 more people. Then we have customs charges and we have more launch charges, and every ship that comes has services. So like one ship comes here, they do ship chandlery work, they need groceries, they need fuel, they need fresh water, they need persons to go to the hospital, they need a hotel. It's a trickling down effect, so it's a lot.
The lightering regulations are all a part of the move toward a national maritime policy that is ongoing. Janaea Noel Ferguson, ZNS Network News.
In other news tonight, Prime Minister Perry Christie says he plans to recruit police reservists to join the fight against crime. Clint Watson has more tonight from that exclusive interview with the Prime Minister on the National Crime Plan.
We are not playing. We're not trifling.
Prime Minister Perry Christie says police, and by extension the Ministry of National Security, must arm themselves with information and statistical data, which is key to prevent crimes from happening.
What we know is this. Somebody is killed. We know that the minute that person is killed, members of their family want to kill somebody in response. That's a natural human feeling. I felt that when the mother came up to me who lost a 19-year-old son at Junkanoo, and I put my arms around her and she put her head on, she said, Prime Minister, they took my child from me. And I knew, I said, God, I don't need to be a rocket scientist or a sociologist to know that if she has another son or relative, they want to respond with violence to get people to feel what they've done to them. Well, if I know that, and you know that, and the public knows that, then the police must know it. Then the Minister of National Security must know it. And we must dedicate the human resources to deal with it.
Mr. Christie says this is where psychoanalysts and psychologists can partner with the government. On the other hand, police will move in swiftly to prevent retaliation. The Prime Minister says if they're able to succeed with this effort in the inner city communities, then they know the country is well on its way to beating crime. Another initiative announced by the government is the inclusion and expansion of roles and duties by police reservists.
For example, certain former senior police officers, that's inspector ranked and above, who are working in the private sector, if they are critical players and they are wanting to be a part of this, which I expect, then we will ask their employers to give them more time to dedicate to this, because we must not allow, okay, the will of the government to be misinterpreted, misunderstood, or not executed upon by the authorities.
In our next report, the Prime Minister talks in greater detail about the manpower and the much talked about 12-hour shifts for police. Clint Watson, ZNS Network News.
Crime also dominated the discussion in the House of Assembly today as Parliament convened for the first session of the new year. Carla Palmer fills us in.
Coming off the heels of triple-digit homicides recorded by the Royal Bahamas Police Force in 2013 and 4 already recorded this year, Member of Parliament for North Eleuthera, Mr. Theo Neely, expected the government during this first sitting of Parliament of this new year to discuss further crime plans moving forward and other critical issues.
After we've had the deadliest, bloodiest Christmas and New Year's holidays, I thought it would be a time when we'd come back in our first sitting and be debating crime and figuring out solutions to reduce the level of crime in the Bahamas. I also thought it would be good if we came back and talked about employment to reduce the unemployment levels at 16.2%.
Mr. Neely, however, was not alone in his thoughts. Member of Parliament for Marco City, Mr. Gregory Moss, agreed.
I'm sick of playing politics. I'm absolutely sick of playing politics. I saw the people at this front bench sit in this house for 5 years and watch the crime numbers mount and did nothing about it. And right now we are sitting in a crisis, an absolute crisis. And what must happen, Mr. Speaker? Must the crisis come to our doorsteps before we take this crisis seriously? Must it? Must it really?
Mr. Moss went a step further in his comments as he diplomatically called on the government to do the job it was elected to do and fulfill the promises to the Bahamian people while campaigning.
There are serious issues that need to be resolved and will have to be resolved in this House. And I'm just saying, if someone shoots one of my brothers or sisters, and I am not without sympathy, I will feel that, and I don't want to wait until one of them is shot for me to get up in this House and express outrage. At the end of the day, this polite approach we're taking to law enforcement, where we are blaming the police or blaming the courts and failing to blame ourselves for passing the proper laws and putting in place the prescriptions that need to be put in place to avoid all of these delays, to avoid all of these excuses, and to deal definitively with crime, stops here. It stops absolutely here. We legislate. We define the definitions. If we do not like the way in which our laws are being interpreted, we redefine those definitions. And the courts comport themselves to the definitions we define. Not us to them to us. At the end of the day, what is allowed is being allowed because we're allowing it.
I'm Carla Palmer for ZNS Network News.
The Bahamas National Citizens Coalition speaking out against the rising crime in the country. The group is calling for the laws of the country to be enforced in an effort to fight crime. Chairman Reverend Andrew Stewart expressed his concerns.
The death penalty ought to be summarily applied. Those Bahamians who obtain weapons from such persons to cause damage to the sovereignty, integrity, and injury to another Bahamian should be summarily charged, and the death penalty ought to be applied. A task force of specially trained persons for the purpose of carrying out the command of this new initiative should immediately be put in place. It should be headed by men such as retired Superintendent Gerard Dean, Special Forces Officer Simeon Stirrup. Other objectives, or their objectives, ought to be crystal clear and unambiguous.
An 18-year-old male was shot while attempting to break into a vehicle. Police say around 3 o'clock this morning, the teenager was trying to enter an omnibus at Straughns Hill Estates off Fire Trail Road. But he was interrupted by the owner, who confronted the suspect and reportedly shot him to the left shoulder with his licensed firearm. The suspect was taken to hospital where he remains under police guard in stable condition.
The Bahamas Spatial Data Infrastructure Act 2013 topped the agenda in the House of Assembly today. The second reading of the act comes some 10 years after the Bahamas National Geographic Information Systems was initially introduced in 2004 with the establishment of a unit in the Office of the Prime Minister. GIS is a technology which integrates hardware, software, and data for capturing, managing, analyzing, and displaying all forms of geographical information. Moving the bill, Environment Minister the Honorable Kenred Dorset says GIS will allow officials to better view, understand, interpret, and visualize data in more effective and efficient ways, which reveal relationships, patterns, and trends in the forms of maps, globes, reports, and charts. He anticipates cost savings and better decision-making in national planning.
Mr. Speaker, in the government where you have one agency investing significant dollars in a particular data set, another ministry who was unaware of the acquisition purchasing the very same thing. And so we will limit the duplication of the expenditure of government agencies by having a central repository specifically for our data sets. You know, public health officials might want to map the numbers of physicians per 1,000 people in a census tract to identify which areas are either adequately served or not served. The aviation sector may use GIS to track shipping routes, cargo lanes, the movement of ships carrying oil or heavy fuel through our waters. GIS, for example, was used a few years ago to track those persons who contracted dengue fever.
In our first look at weather, we have a stalled out frontal boundary south of the capital, and that is expected to track back towards the north as a warm front will trigger a few showers during the early morning hours. But outside of our studios, we have cloudy skies, temperatures 74 degrees, relative humidity on the rich side at 83%, winds east-northeast at 9 knots, your barometric pressure 1,020.7 millibars at 30.14 inches, and it is steady. But stay tuned. Temperatures around the family violence, travel, and boating forecast is still to come.
Well, still ahead tonight, a regional chess champion celebrated in Parliament.
And a young musician making big waves in the entertainment industry. That story and more coming up in the Bahamas tonight.
This portion of the news is brought to you by Shell Helix Ultra. Performance you can see.